Hey, hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk about the output options in the fractal universe, setting up for stereo, setting up for mono, and how to compromise and meet in the middle. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about this section here in the output configuration. In an ideal world, I would just set up in stereo and leave it at that. Sounds so much bigger and so much better. Big stereo chorus, big stereo reverbs, wide delays, panning delays. It's amazing. But every once in a while, you're going to run into a situation where you can't have stereo. So I'm going to use my own very specific situation as the example. In my Metallica tribute band, we only use the one Axe effect. So myself and the other guitarist both go through this one Axe effects 3. And you can see I've got it set up so that we've both got our own signal chain. I go through input 1 and he goes through input 3. And at the end here, I go out 1 and 3. He goes out 2 and 4. 1 is for front of house, 1's for our in-ear mixes. So like I said, if I could, I would just run in stereo. But unfortunately, the dude that we're using on front of house doesn't have enough inputs to have us both running stereo. So we have to sum down to mono. So to show you quickly, this is what it would sound like if I could run it in stereo. Got some pretty nice wide reverb and some stereo delays happening there. So in order to get this to sum down to mono, the Axe effects is not really straightforward. It doesn't just have a single mono output. So you do actually have to come in and set it up. So to get things in mono, there's a couple of things to take into consideration. First of all, copy left to right or sum left and right. What does that mean? Copy left to right. This mode takes the signal from the left channel of the stereo output and duplicates it to the right channel. The issue there though is if, for example, what if you do set yourself up in stereo and you like a ping pong delay or a panning delay? If you do this example, you're going to lose all of the information that's pinging and ponging or panning. The benefit of this option is that it generally avoids phase cancellation issues. And that brings me across to the sum left and right. So this mode combines both the left and the right channels of the stereo output into a single mono signal. It does preserve all the information from both channels. However, it can introduce phase cancellation issues. So what's the right approach? I'll show you both and give you some examples of the things that you might run into and you want to avoid. And of course, then we'll solve the problem. So the chorus here, this is at 100% spread, and I've got the delay, I'm using the stereo analog, and I've got the left to right time ratio at 95%. Now I do actually really like to invert the phase when I'm playing in stereo. It just opens up the stereo delays in this really weird, like it's almost behind you next door and really kind of envelops your head, especially when you're wearing headphones. It's fantastic. But before we do that, this simple time ratio adjustment will help have it left and right, and you'll hear that stereo signal. So let me just sum everything down. Let's just go copy left to right. You're still retaining all the information. You're only getting the left channel though. So in that example, the copy left to right works pretty good. But like I was saying before, what happens if I want to use panning delay? You can hear it coming in and out. That's because the right side of the delay is not being picked up there at all. Same thing happens with the ping pong. So if we go, yeah, cool. So it just doesn't work. So for me on this particular preset, this isn't such a big deal because I use the stereo delay. But if you're going to be using some panning stuff, obviously if you're playing in mono, you're not going to get some panning. So just set up your presets in a smart way. So the other option across here is the sum left and right. That is essentially taking both channels, putting them together, and it retains all of the information. But this does introduce some phase cancellation issues, and it's mostly notable on the chorus, and I'll show you what I was talking about with my phasing delay. First of all, I'll show you on this chorus. If I spread this out even further, go back to now 0. Now, whilst all the information is there, it is substantially quieter. If I now play at 100% and compare the output types, Yeah, stereo is just way, way better. But you can obviously hear there that with the sum left to right, when we've got the stereo spread, even marginally spread, we'll hear it 100%, it's quieter. That's because we're getting phase cancellation. Chorus essentially is phase. It's even got that pictured there, it's phasing. So the obvious option here is to bring it back to 0. And you won't run into any issues. But what happens if you use the stereo delay and you go phasing on one side? Because like I was saying before, it sounds so amazing. Check this out. There's no delay. That's because the phase is reversed. This is a perfect example of phase cancellation. Left side, note if I go none, delay. Now it's only quieter because I turned it down and I reset the preset. And then if we try it again, we'll do the right side this time. And then if we do both, it's going to be there again because both sides have been flipped. So they're opposite and you're going to hear them. So that's a situation where if you're like me and you do like the phase reversed stereo delay, you just have to suck it up and not have it. The stereo spread doesn't really affect it volume wise, so that doesn't matter so much. But obviously if you're going to use this ratio here and offset left to the right, you're going to hear two delays because they're now both centered. They're both going straight down the middle. So this is another situation where you're just gonna have to suck it up and either have two delay repeats, which might not really go noticed, or you're just gonna have to set this at 100 and do that. So what's the answer? Which do you use? Sum left and right or copy left to right? I think realistically, it depends on how you're running your setup. If you've got your choruses set wide and your delays set just like this, I think your best option here is to go copy left to right. It still retains the information from both cabinet blocks, which is great. But if you've got panning or ping pong delays set up, then in that situation, you're gonna have to either change your delay or center your choruses should they be on. And this way, even though that's a panning delay, you're not gonna hear the panning. And you're not gonna miss out on any of those repeats, because all of the information is retained. Whereas if I go back to copy left to right, it's very uneven. Now, again, are you going to notice that when you're playing a gig? Maybe, maybe not. I found this fascinating, and I've always struggled with which one to use. So what I decided is to go through some left and right, and I'm now going to go through and I'm going to change all of my choruses and my delays because I think it's going to be better that way than what we had it. So this is the perfect example of I would prefer to have it in stereo, but there has to be a compromise. The other option that I would definitely consider is duplicating your presets, having one specifically for stereo and one specifically designed for mono. Then obviously, depending on your situation, choose the stereo or choose the mono, and away you go. Quite simple. I hope that's cleared up a bit of confusion for some of you guys. I know for me, it definitely was a bit confusing. I didn't realize that the chorus was going to be experiencing that much phase cancellation. And the stereo delays, I love the phase reverse. Now it's pretty obvious that that would be happening, but it didn't actually occur to me until I sat down and actually had a look at it. If you do like the sound of this preset, I do have a version available on my store. You can check that out there. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned. See you next time.